So what is Martin Scorsese's greatest movie? One of them, arguably, is the movie we're going to talk about in this video. It's the 1990 American gangster movie, Goodfellas. I think this is my favorite Scorsese movie. I'm going to tell you why. Let's review it, let's analyze it, and help you interpret it. This video is going to be a brief primer on Goodfellas and how to get into it, how to understand it. Let's talk about it coming up next. Goodfellas was, as I said, released in 1990. Hard to believe. As of this video making, it's 30 years ago. Movie stars Ray Liotta as the gangster Henry Hill, who through the 1950s up through 1980 worked with the Italian mob, I think in New Jersey, around in those parts, into Pittsburgh as well, on the East Coast in the east of the United States. We're told early on that this character of Henry Hill wanted to be a mobster when he was 13 years old. In fact, he became pretty wealthy as a young man working for the mob. And he lived a high lifestyle from about the late 1950s up through when he's caught in 1980. There is heavy voiceover narration in this movie from the Henry Hill character, who I think his voice dominates the movie. I think the movie is told from his perspective. You also get the voiceover narration from his wife, played by Lorraine Bracco, in some parts of the movie. You might then say this movie is the shared vision of both Henry Hill and his wife after they've been caught by the FBI, going into the witness protection program, reminiscing about their wild days as a gangster family in America.
By the time I grew up, there was $30 billion a year in cargo moving through Idlewild Airport, and believe me, we tried to steal every bit of it.
Well, we weren't married to 9-to-5 guys, but the first time I realized how different was when Mickey had a hostess party.
The movie also has old Scorsese standbys Robert DeNiro and Joe Pesci. Robert De Niro plays a lower-key supporting character in this movie, Jimmy Conway, the friend so-called of Henry Hill. To me, this is Joe Pesci's most memorable role by far. I think if we think of Joe Pesci, we're probably thinking of his character, this hot-headed, terrible dude in Goodfellas.
I can't tomorrow night. I gotta meet Tootie.
You could meet Tootie. You could fucking come early and then still go.
Tommy, why do you always do this?
Hey, remember that fucking Tommy shit? What the fuck I asked you for, Henry? I'm asking you for a favor. I do a lot of fucking favors for you, don't I? I'm trying to bang this fucking broad. You wanna help me out?
These three men make up sort of second, third tier mobsters. They're not the top tier mobsters as you've seen in Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather movies. And that's really interesting. You know, Scorsese is taking on a genre absolutely at this moment in time dominated by The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2, which by 1990, certainly the late 1980s, celebrated as two of the greatest movies ever made, greatest American movies ever made, and sort of take up the whole visionary space of what a gangster is. Those two, along with Scarface by Brian De Palma, you know, Scorsese comes along with Goodfellas and actually wipes away, I think attacks a lot of the idealism, the sexiness of being a gangster, being a mobster in America. Coppola's Godfather movies, which I absolutely love, give dignity and honor to mobsters who are nevertheless doing terrible and nefarious things. But in Goodfellas, you get almost all of that sucked out of the gangster lifestyle. You know, the movie, as it goes along, is heading towards Henry Hill ratting on all of his friends, all of his colleagues and compatriots in the mob business, whom he's been around since he was a kid. So you have this movie actually angling towards why would a guy rat out his friends and send them to jail? I think Scorsese argues, you know, that these mobsters like Henry Hill, they're not sensationalistic, they're not sexy, they come to a bad end. This is a highly moralistic movie, by the way, that really doesn't moralize. It's up to the viewer to sort of pick out the morals in this movie. But, you know, by the end, you're asking these questions, or I think you should. Why would Hill, you know, destroy his friendships? Did he even have friendships with this Jimmy Conway character, with the Joe Pesci character at all? Or were these merely working relationships? I think one of the answers to those questions is, yeah, they weren't even friendships at all. There was total betrayal on the part of Henry Hill, who narked on his friends. But, you know, these guys throughout the movie, they're whacking each other, they're killing off friends, they're killing off associates, and they call it just business. And I think Scorsese, you know, one of his moralistic points is, you know, that money is the center of the relationships between all these characters. Once you take money away, or once you threaten somebody's life and make that the most important thing for them, they will rat you out, they will tell the FBI on you, they will go against you. And you see that often in this movie with these transactions between characters, one giving another character money. A lot of close-up shots of hands exchanging money in this movie. For Scorsese, who in Taxi Driver has the same thing going on, he would call that sort of a sacramental relationship, making it sort of a warped Catholic idea of relationship. The exchange, the friendship, for Catholics, it's the Lord's Supper, which makes friends between, believers and Jesus Christ. Well, in this movie, what makes friends, fake friends as it were, I think, is the money transactions that happen throughout the movie. The movie also depicts another one of Scorsese's favorite things to do, which is show the high-flying, Americanized lifestyle of stuff, brand new stuff, conspicuous consumption items, drugs, money, cars, guns, and women. In the movie, for example, Henry Hill doesn't just have a mistress on the side and, he gives her all kinds of money. He also has got a second mistress. The guys in this movie, the gangsters, and remember they're lower level, second or third tier gangsters, they still have enough money to live it up. The movie very explicitly calls them thieves. I mean, how do they get their money? They rob airports. They just rob people outright. The movie does not glorify theft at all, as I think, like the Ocean's 11 movie does. It actually says these guys, they're not sexy like the gangsters in The Godfather. They're just outright thieves who are anti-friendship, and they just actually, in their hearts, I think, hate everybody. The way they enjoy life is to rob, to distribute money, to buy stuff, and then to revel in that stuff, and then to go rob some more. And Scorsese is asking this question, is this a good life? Is this what a good life is? One of his favorite questions to ask. He asks it in all kinds of movies. I think that Goodfellas is part of a series of movies that Scorsese has made, looking back on his career from the year 2020, in which I'm making this video, where he's showing you people who are in sort of a hell state that they themselves have created. This movie reminds me a lot of The Wolf of Wall Street, for example, maybe a little bit of Gangs of New York, where everybody is out for themselves and out for stuff or money. There's nothing greater in life for them. Henry Hill, by the end of this movie, what does he have? He's got a suburban lifestyle hidden by the government, and what does he want? He wants to go back to the gangster lifestyle.
And that's the hardest part. Today, everything is different. There's no action. I have to wait around like everyone else. Can't even get decent food. Right after I got here, I ordered some spaghetti with marinara sauce, and I got egg noodles and ketchup. I'm an average nobody. Get to live the rest of my life like a schnook.
In fact, that makes this movie have one of the more powerful, I think, relevant final intertitles I've ever seen. Usually movies end with the rest of the story, an intertitle that gives you a little bit of history, what happened next. Doesn't really matter that much. This movie says, Henry Hill, after he was captured, actually got busted for narcotics one more time in the mid-1980s, and it makes you ask this question, can Henry Hill ever get out of the trap that he's made in his life of just selling drugs, getting money, selling drugs, getting money? So Scorsese is asking, in the United States, especially with these mobsters or gangsters, what is a good life? The good life is an illusion. You lose all your friends in the end. You lose the life you thought you loved. Now, this movie is extremely well made. It, to me, is the culmination of the previous 15 to 20 years of Scorsese's filmmaking career. He pulls out all of his tricks in this movie. For example, a lot of freeze frames in this movie, montages of family photos. You see that in Raging Bull, for example. Heavy voiceover narration. This is one of the few movies, I think, where voiceover narration, and a ton of it, works extremely well, because this movie, you shouldn't be tricked by this, is the perspective of Henry Hill. It's not really what's happening, it's what Hill sees or what Hill tells you. I think the visuals in this movie go along with, amplify the voiceover narration quite well. It makes this a literary movie. It makes us examine the subjective character of Henry Hill, how he creates himself and tells his story. Now, one of the interesting critical questions for me as a scholar or as a critic, just thinking about this, is How did Scorsese go from The Last Temptation of Christ, the movie he made before Goodfellas, to Goodfellas? What's the relationship between these two movies? I think overall he's asking the question, probably in a lot of these movies, as I've said in this video, what is a good life? What makes a good life? And when any person answers that question, you have the immediate response, well, why is that your answer? Why do you think that's the good life? And Scorsese, I think, through a lot of his work, trying to present this artistic vision of America as it is, people's ideals of America, you know, get rich quick, make a ton of money, success is tied to money, for example. Scorsese wants to think about that and maybe affirm it a little bit, but also to counteract it, I think, a lot. Camera work in this movie is unbelievably amazing. I can't even believe some of the things he does. Scorsese shows himself as an auteur, and it's just amazing. I can't even describe it. You should just watch this movie. But I think the camera in this movie is Henry Hill's perspective, Lorraine Bracco as the wife of Henry Hill's perspective, and a first-person observer, sort of Scorsese's own, you know, ghost-like wanderer who goes to this world. And I think you get a blend of visions here. I think you can say the camera in this movie is sort of 3 or 4 people, 2 characters and its own character, which is really interesting, I think. So because of the visuals, because of the audio, Scorsese used a lot of pop songs as the soundtrack, because of the performances, because of the subject matter, because of how Scorsese works with the gangster movie ethic and the vision of gangster movies, how he counteracts a lot of stuff from The Godfather, because of the historical circumstances. I mean, every level to this movie is excellent. I think that makes this one of the best American movies ever made. A lot of people will want to watch Goodfellas because they think it's sexy or because it depicts the gangster lifestyle and it's fun and flashy. But you've got to have wiser eyes when you watch this movie, as I'm arguing. That's why I wouldn't give this movie perhaps to a 16-year-old. I think you need to be older to see it and understand it. I think you need to have been betrayed yourself to realize that money isn't everything. I think then maybe you might see this movie with better eyes. Have you seen Goodfellas? What do you think about it? What do you think about what I said? Please leave us a comment. Argue with me. Anything you say is great. I really appreciate it. Please subscribe to my channel for more great movie content. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.